Yeah, yeah. Voice sound good?
Yo, it's YOC. Holla. We in the building. Healing Justice mixtape. I know shit be holding me back. What be holding you back?
Okay.
Talk to him.
I said, don't get out of pocket, you just need to learn your lesson, ayy. We were always legends, never peasants, it's a blessing, ayy. Healing with our truth and all our truth, that's how we detonate. Whip it up and then let's get paid, create the path and get out my way.
Hey,
Out my way,
hey,
out my way,
hey,
out my way.
hey.
We the ones you have forgotten. Your hateration for generations been filled with toxic. Got a case of every black sister, brother, you're just a rotten.
Hi, and welcome to Artistic Talents, produced by Melvin Isaac. My name is Alyssa Lee, and I'm your host for today. I would like to introduce my guest to you.
Peace, Alex. Peace, Keron.
In honor of Black History Month, we're going to be covering some topics that are particularly important to the Black community. So we're going to start out with gentrification. So there's been a lot of conversation around areas like Harlem and Brooklyn. So how has that impacted you?
For me, it's impacted me in different ways because in my neighborhood, I grew up in East New York, and in East New York, I see a lot of like business that I grew up when I was like 17, when I was coming back and forth to New York, and like I always know these businesses, and like now when I'm 25, I don't see those businesses no more. It's new businesses, and like the houses that I see people I know is like who live with me on the block don't even live on the block no more. So it's like gentrification is real, and yeah, impact my family and my friends.
Yeah, I also agree with Keron. I think when I think about like, if I was thinking about like deeper, I was just like, just understanding that like in certain times we wasn't even able to like walk through white people's neighborhoods without getting attacked, without getting beat up. You feel me? Shot at, stabbed, all types of stuff. And like now it's just like it's freely that like we just letting them rock. You feel me? Like literally they walk down our blocks, they create bars, they shut down our 99-cent stores, they stop dudes from selling drugs, like people trying to survive. And now it's like literally like, and you know, I know like with my indigenous black folk, like we're always like, we're forgiving, you know, we're always forgiving people, you know, but it's just crazy to me how like the structures of violence that like we're having to go through now, of just like having to like just take that, oh, you know, they kick us out of our cribs and then they make that a building for white people. We gotta take that. You understand? Like you know, it's just so much of that, and yeah, I feel like it's just hard to like figure out like how to stop that or how to fight against that, and not look at being or seen as somebody who's like, oh, you're a predator, or like, oh, you're using violence to hurt people. So
Yeah, there's so many assumptions, and people are being displaced. Do you have any solutions that you can think of to really like preserve the culture as people move in and change things?
Like for me, I would say to preserve the culture is just like still bring your friends back to the block, like still bring them, still build, still continue to keep the hope alive that the block will rejuvenate again, and to see that generations will come that, oh well, our block will be the block, but we know you're gonna change, but you're gonna change back because everything got to come back to the original form.
Yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, there's a lot of beauty that still like rests within us that like obviously can't be stripped away in a certain way, and I think we gotta really like learn or like be grounded to see those things. You know, there's always like somebody getting shot, somebody moms is like can't take care of her kids. It's always like something that is like bringing oppression onto us. And I think like we need to figure out moments, memories, experiences, and wisdoms that like could put us in a different bag for hope. You feel me? So we could realize those things, and then we could be like, oh, like yeah, I know where darkness is at, and I know where like the evils rest in certain places, but like I know there's good too in certain places, like, and I just got to figure out how do I like stay on those sides and like feel my energy with those things, so I don't always have to feel like oppression's on my neck in a certain way. But then it's all within us. You feel me? It's like it's collective. You feel me? Like, you know, when you're around people and you're having like great times, like you remember that. You know, you take into that, and then after like that helps build for your next part of your journey. It's just how do you like use that to ground yourself.
That ties. So I think that ties into kind of what H.O.L.L.A is doing. Like, can you discuss a little bit more like what you guys, as graduates from the youth organizing collective, what you learned from that and how that ties into entrepreneurship, which could then tie into building within the community so that it can stay or survive gentrification?
Yeah, I think like we just do. I think it's just grassroots, man. We just like, you know, and then it's about like figuring out how to be as human as possible.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's like probably one of the most amazing things is that like is to imagine all the possibilities of being yourself, and then you know there's no restrictions to that or like you know there's no barriers to figuring out that. So like when we think about like, you know, our young people and like how they like are basically our future, our legacies, you have to figure out like how are we going to invest into them, and the investment in them have to be off the chart. It has to be infinitive.
Yeah.
You feel me? You can't like stop at a certain level and just say, oh they could just read a book. Like, nah, they could create the book.
Yes.
You feel me? Like you know, we have to figure out more ways for them to like own their own leadership. You know, so definitely the youth organizing collective that's part of H.O.L.L.A. Like, yeah, we just we try to build with our people and just like be as human as possible, figuring that out. You know.
Man, you sum it all, man. But but from my experience, I can say being in youth organizing collective is like, it's not only is people you work with, is the relationship that we cultivate over the 18 months that make us be the youth organizing collective. The movement is we all come to a realization that the movement is not about us only now. It's about the larger community. It's about the marginalized community. It's about, we really talking about black and brown people. We talk about indigenous people. We talk about African people. We really cultivated all those Afro-Caribbean, Latinx, all those into one culture and told them that you all beautiful in one nation. And we look at those and like, when we look at YRC, we're looking at the hope that everybody's looking for, the dreams that we're looking for, the accomplish of the things that we have done so far. We've done it as a collective, not a single person.
It's beautiful, and that's true. Like, we're all stronger when we work together than just by ourselves. So I want to ask you a little bit of what you feel, or why you feel Black love is important, or its importance today. Like, why do we need that?
I said Black love is very important and very vital in this current administration, because if you don't have self-love, then you can't have love for nobody else. And you have to love yourself in order to love your other people. And for me, it's very important because my mom is dark skinned, and I was like, Ma, like, why are you so dark skinned? And I never understand that. And then as I get older, I start realizing my mom is beautiful because she's dark skinned. No, she's beautiful as a woman. And I start realizing that Black love is very vital in our communities. That lack of culture doesn't exist anymore. And we try to bring that back, bring that old school love back, where we write letters to your soulmate, to take her on the picnic. Like, those are the old school love we're talking about. And that's what we're trying to bring back.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, you was asking what I thought about Black love.
Yeah, if you see an importance to having it.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, like what Keron was saying, there's a lot of understanding that like there has to be self-love, and then just like love for humanity itself, in a certain way. So definitely, I think you know, growing up, there was so much being stripped away from that Black love. We used to be like, oh, you're an African booty scratcher. Or something. You feel me? Like, we used to be like, man, or like, we used to be like, oh, nah, you being an Indian giver? You understand? Like, we like creating, like, how history has created chains of, like, of you feel me? Or shameful of, like, our own Black selves. you know. So definitely I feel like, yeah, there has to be like a lot of like self-love. You have to start affirming yourself in the morning. Feel me? Start affirming your blackness. Just be like, yo, you're beautiful and you black, like, just, and then, you know, just more of and then also it's not only that, it's about like the other people that's like also in that spectrum of black that probably also doesn't get that that affirmation as well. And then I think this is also, it's not only about like, I think black love connects to whatever human love. You feel me? Because like I said, like us black people and indigenous folk, we're so forgiving. And to be people who's like always opening up our hearts, opening our homes and our cultures, even when we know people's gonna oppress us and hurt us, I think that's a strength right there. That shows that, like, you know, we're gonna figure out whatever differences or like whatever traumas to come through our love, though. So definitely, I feel like black love is definitely the most important.
So you touched on really creating affirmations for yourself. What other barriers do you think kind of prevent us from black love, from its existence?
Man, I think like one of like my strongest ones would probably be like not caring for yourself, like not knowing how to love yourself. You know, like you could just wake up in the morning and make moves. You feel me? I'm going to A to B to C to D, just to get back to home. You know, but those don't really show the those, you might not be ever grounded into like thinking about like, what am I doing that's like what is my body intentionally feeling? You feel me? Like what is the food I'm putting into my body? So like I think like, yeah, like I'm definitely probably also myself, I'm probably like not intentional all the time of like what's going on in my body, what I need, how am I feeling, or how am I, like, what is my healing process looking like? You know, like how am I like taking stuff out and bringing stuff in? And I think that's like very hard for a lot of us. So something that I just struggle with.
Thank you. Any thoughts to add to that?
Nah, he summed it up right. He summed it up right.
I want to thank you for participating in the discussion.
Yes, most definitely.
Very valuable.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank the world. Thank black people.
Thank black people, man. Healing justice, baby. It's all about it.
Thank you.
Peace. My name is Keron again. You can follow H.O.L.L.A, and you want to know about my story and my co-organizer Alex's story, you can find us at holla-inc.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at Holla, How Alive Link All Together. You can find us on Twitter at Holla_US. And you can also find us on Facebook on How Alive Link All Together. We do accept donations, and we were looking forward to meeting you and all the people out there.
Hi, welcome back. I'd like to introduce our next guest. Peace, Mark. Peace, Miasia. Hello. So I would like to discuss what you've learned through, you were also a graduate of H.O.L.La's Youth Organizing Collective. So can you tell me a little bit about how that prepared you for your interest in entrepreneurship?
So as a graduate of H.O.L.A and YOC, I learned a lot about the nonprofit organization in the field, and a lot about what it takes, like grant writing, sponsors, the summit, like a lot of events that we hosted. It taught me a lot. So it inspired me to want to open up my own not-for-profit organization, not now, but eventually at some point, because I have a lot of insight and I feel like I can give back to the community in a different way, building on from the things that I learned from H.O.L.L.A and YOC.
That's awesome. Very cool. And do you have any thoughts on entrepreneurship? Are you involved in anything on the business end?
Well, one of the things that I do now, I founded my own non-for-profit called the Redemption Center, and we provide transitional housing for men being released in prison. At one point, we were doing both men and women. We're looking to go back to doing both men and women. And I did it for this whole idea of a need and to change the face, if you will, of the formerly incarcerated. Because oftentimes people look at someone who's formerly incarcerated and, you know, there's this stigma that's attached to them that primarily denotes that, you know, they're inferior, they're incapable of, you know, of living within the parameters and means of the society lawfully, which are all like misnomers, and it's just simply not truth. And not everyone who is in prison is, if you will, an animal and or savage, as you know the media has portrayed it or portrayed us to be, you know. And so when we talk about, again, the whole idea of entrepreneurship, I believe that that is a way for black people to begin to do for themselves and not primarily depend on someone else doing for us. You know, as I was on my way coming here, I was, you know, reflecting on something that Carter G. Woodson said in Miseducation of the Negro, and he talks about how he who controls your thoughts also control your habits and your actions, and basically, you know, will define for you everything that you need to do. And I think that when we begin to start defining for ourselves, creating things for ourselves, supporting things in our own community, you know, then I firmly believe that we can put, if you will, a dent or take, you know, when I was growing up, they used to have this commercial on TV called Crime Dog McGriff that was designed to take a bite out of crime. I think that once we start coming together and putting our things together, then we can take a real bite out of crime.
And I believe you were formerly incarcerated?
Yes, actually I spent 22 years as an adult, and adult started for me at 16, and 3 years as a juvenile, and that started for me at 13. So I mean, like, I had this stretch. You know, I when I went in prison as an adult at 16, and when I came out, I was a child at 39.
So how do you personally deal with the stigma that's attached to being formerly incarcerated?
Well, one of the first things that I came to terms with is that what I did doesn't define who I am. You know, I committed an offense against the community as a result of a host of other things, other variables, poverty, you know, really not wanting to stay in school because I felt that in the school system, the things that they were teaching me in 9th grade, 10th grade, I already learned in 6th grade and 5th grade. So it was a waste of my time, you know, to go to school. And I became attracted to what was considered glamorous at that time, which was the street life. Some of that, as I matured and grew and began to read and study, I learned was by design. It's not like that just haphazardly happened or was coincidental. It was by design. And with who I am today, you know, I don't have a problem letting people know the amount of time that I spent in prison, what I went to prison for. None of those are secrets, because those things do not define who I am, nor do they hamper my ability or potential.
So true. And Miasia, you were also formerly incarcerated?
No.
No, you weren't? Okay.
So my dad was incarcerated for 25 years. And I practically grew up going to see my dad, like, on visits or trailer visits, which is like extended visits for like 2 days and a night. And it affected me like different than other kids, because when it was like father-daughter dinners or like Father's Day breakfasts, like, my dad wasn't there. But like, I always say, like, my dad was a big part of my life. My dad inspired me to take up being like involved in social justice movements and not-for-profit organizations, because he was wrongfully convicted. So looking at his case and growing up, like, knowing the true story and experiencing a lot of things while going to see him as a kid, it helped me today to do a lot of the stuff that I do.
Yeah, so I'm sure, especially knowing that he was wrongfully convicted, there's a lot of emotions that you had, whether, you know, grief or anger. So what is your healing process like dealing with that?
So I always say that I don't ever feel like I ever really heal from anything. I feel like I learned to cope with a lot of situations. So the way that I coped with my dad being incarcerated was getting involved in a lot of like movements, not only for black men but for black women. So I started out working with Girls for Gender Equity, and then I started to work with H.O.L.L.A. And working with H.O.L.L.A, I learned a lot more about incarceration and the movement and how it affects black men and a lot of things that they go through. So it helped my coping process because I began to understand my father. I began to understand like why he does a lot of the things that he does, why he acts the way that he acts. Like, it's not like he wants to, but it's a mentality that was drilled into his head after being locked up for so long.
So, having some of that background information and like secondhand experience from your father being incarcerated, what's one thing that you would change in like the criminal justice system?
I would change the public defense. So when I first started out, like going to college and school, I would always say I wanted to be a lawyer. And I think that passion is still there, just not as strong as it was before. But my dad had a public attorney, and his public attorney really didn't look at his case. But as I grew up, there was a lot of holes that I found in my father's case that I felt like was clear to any person that could read and see, like anybody that understood law. And I was young, so I had to look up a lot of those terms and like piece stuff together for myself. But I understood a lot that was just there that could have easily been fixed, could have easily been talked about, could have easily lessened his sentence, but nobody did anything and nobody said nothing.
That's so difficult, I can't imagine. I wanted to ask, when you first found out that you were going to be incarcerated, can you walk me through the process of what was happening, like going through your mind, like to prepare?
Well, the interesting thing about that is that one of the things I oftentimes share with people is that they process you in prison. It's a process, but they never process you out. When I was in juvenile, the juvenile was a first step that sort of like started to prepare me for prison. And when I originally went into juvenile the first time, it was merely because I didn't go to school. I refused to go to school. And, I went in there and I learned so much about criminal activity. I mean, like, I was novice, basically knew nothing outside of maybe going into a store and shoplifting, because as a young kid, sometime I had to do that in order, because, my mother was a single parent. She had, 6 other children, relegated to welfare, which really didn't afford us the opportunity to live healthy and normal lives. So I was compelled at times to go out and, steal from grocery stores, food, and bring home so that we could eat. Be that as it may, when I went through juvenile detention, my first experience with being like confined and taken away from society was in Spofford. And again, I was already familiar with the streets, so I knew how to basically take care of myself. I wasn't afraid to fight. That's what we did in the streets. And basically, when I came out of that, after being back and forth in and out of those for 3 years, when I originally got arrested the first time, again, this process. And the process starts with this removing you from your dignity. It starts with stripping you of your dignity. And how do they begin to strip your dignity? Take your clothes off. Bend over. Spread them. We want to make sure you don't have no contra. I mean, like, just this dehumanizing piece. And you get that initially right away, and it's like, wow, what's going on here? Yeah, it's like, it's like a shock. And as you move back and forth, going back and forth from court to whatever detention center you is, you begin to start to get accustomed to it. You adjust to it. All right, I know I'm gonna have to strip. I know they're gonna look up my crack of my behind. I know they're gonna tell me to open my mouth. You get immune to it. So by the time you get to upstate to Department of Correctional Facility, you're already ready for that because you've been going through it back and forth for X amount of months, weeks, and in some instances years. And I always resisted it. I resisted that. I was like, what man is going to want to look at another man's private part? Something is wrong with you, not me. So, I played these mental gymnastics with myself as survival techniques, and just the dehumanization. You asked about the criminal justice system. One thing I will say about the criminal justice system is that it's definitely criminal. It's criminal. It's criminal. Whereas it's supposed to be about rehabilitating you, but we need to start with habilitating us first. Forget about rehabilitating us. I don't want you to rehabilitate me and turn me back to what I was doing that ultimately led me here. I want you to help me get to some spaces and places where I won't have to do what I did that ultimately got me here. And, when the sister was talking about just now, Miasia was talking about the public defenders. It's not just the public defenders. You got district attorneys. It's all corrupt and just like crooked. And it's not about fairness. That's what most people in America don't understand about the court system, the district attorney, the police. It's not about fairness. It's about procedures. Did they follow the procedure? We don't care if you're guilty or innocent. Was the procedures followed? And then when you start talking about the procedures, that has different implications for different groups of people. So one of the things that I would change about it is that one of the first things I would do is I would allow cameras to go into the courtroom. So we need to because the public needs to see what's going on in there.
That'd be very powerful.
Let's get cameras in the courtroom.
Thank you so much for opening up your hearts and sharing those experiences with us. Really appreciate you, though.
Hi, I would like to welcome another guest. Peace, Isaac.
How you doing?
I'm well. So I would love to hear about Isaac Quarterly and how you kind of started as an artist.
So my journey as an artist started during my incarceration back in like 2009. I started doing art on, I believe I shared this with you before, I was doing art on greeting cards for folks inside prison. So that's kind of where I started with the arts. But when I came home with a bunch of art, and I'm just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with this art, but I'm gonna do something. This is what I've been doing when I was in there. I'm gonna do something with this. I'll show it. I didn't, that was my plan, just bring the art home. So I did that, and I started making more art when I came home. I started participating in more art exhibitions, and from there I was just like, I want to have my own business, and Isaac's Quarterly, what it is today from what it started from is it's like a total evolution. We went through so many phases of having different identities. What do we want to do? Do we want to be a business where we sell items? Do we want to provide resources? Do we want to, what do we want to do? Do we want to just have events? Like, what is this? So it took some time, and this was founded by me in 2014. So, it's been a while now. And in 2018, I think that, I want to say I know that we found what we want to do, and Isaac's Quarterly is a resource to artists, And our first resource is the Confined Arts, which is the platform for currently and formerly incarcerated artists to show their work. So it's taken its time, but we're here now. We're gonna ride this wave.
That's awesome, because having an artistic outlet is so important.
Yes.
Especially to healing.
Yes.
Can you share kind of your healing process, coming home? Incarcerated?
Healing. I think most of it comes, at those times where, I'm either in a session with, the people I work with or I'm working with at the time, or when I'm doing art. Those are the only two times, either when I'm talking about something I've been through, or I'm listening to something else someone else has been through that's kind of similar to me, and I can relate and gain that interpersonal comfort right there with that. Or when I'm by myself and I'm zoning out in my art. Those are like the only two times I can really find healing and, just not just in what I've been through in prison, but just in life. We go through so much stuff on a day-to-day basis we have to be healed from. People hurt our feelings. We got to get healed from that, it's, and even bigger, so. Yeah.
How would you say your experience being incarcerated changed your perspective, like growth-wise?
In general?
Yeah.
I mean, shucks, I don't want to go to jail no more, so I'm going to stop doing a lot of the stuff I was doing before. It's changed it in that perspective, just like obviously for the obvious reasons. But it's changed my perspective in a lot of ways. Being without a lot of things makes you appreciate a lot more. It's changed my perspective as a father. I was just telling my lady yesterday that we took my daughter out for her birthday. She turned 12 yesterday. And I was telling her, I used to be in jail praying for the opportunity to be able to take care of my kids. So to be able to, grab her from school and take her out, and, show her some fun on her birthday, it really meant a lot to me. So jail changed my perspective in a lot of ways. It's changed my perspective on how to deal with people, Just imagine living in like a room this size with like 10, 12 people, you know what I mean? You definitely have to learn how to read body language and, make it work, you know what I mean? So when you have to work in work environments, small work environments, you kind of, know how to navigate, how to move to be comfortable and not to step on people's toes or not to, whatever it is you have to do because So it's changed my perspective through experience and, just having a lot of time to think and losses, that I had to suffer. So it's changed a lot. It's changed my perspective in a lot of different ways,
What would you say was one of the hardest challenges?
What, for me to overcome?
While being incarcerated.
I think to answer that question, to give you a good answer for that, an honest one, I think that the hardest thing for me to overcome was the understanding that I remember that my youngest daughter's, the one who celebrated her birthday, her mother would say, well, you chose to be in jail. And I used to be like, yeah, what do you mean? I didn't choose to come here. I didn't ask them to lock me up. I didn't ask them to keep me this long. And it took me some time to really understand that I made that choice through my decisions. When I made those decisions, knowing the consequences, I inadvertently chose to, go to jail. Like you're making this choice to either, if you go down this road, you're either going to end up dead or in jail, and you go down that road, you've already made the choice to, either end up dead or in jail. So whatever becomes of you, that was your choice you made. You know what I mean? So it took me a while to understand that and be able to own up to that. You know what I mean?
Because we know that Black and brown communities are disproportionately imprisoned, and sometimes the reasons are out of their hands because it's survival, what advice would you give to a person who, is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place?
I don't know, man. I try to share wisdom with people based on what I know, what I've been through, and I just try to refer them to places. But I would always say talk to people. Utilize the resources most close to you, even if you don't know that you have them. The people closest to you, even if it's not somebody you're totally comfortable speaking to, if they've shown you that they're, trustworthy, maybe it may be worth it to share something with them so that they could possibly help you. A closed mouth doesn't get fed. Sometimes we don't get the help we need because we don't speak up, and sometimes we don't know to speak up. So. I guess the advice I would say is utilize the resources around you. I spoke to some of the new scholars that came into Columbia. I went to their class on Monday and I spoke with them. They're formerly incarcerated students. And, I told them the same thing. Y'all on this campus. I'm gonna be personally upset with you guys if y'all do not utilize the resources that are here. It's a ton of them. And a lot of times we have resources around us and we don't know about it,
So can you share a bit about the work you're doing at Columbia?
Okay, so I'm the Arts and Communications Coordinator at the Center for Justice at Columbia University. And a lot of my work is communication, so handling the center's public outreach, the mailer, the social media, the website. More than that, I teach in prison. We founded a directly impacted group on campus where we provide resources and support for directly impacted students and staff members on campus. I speak all around campus. I speak all around the country with Columbia, talking about the arts and incarceration. I don't know, it's hard to just say what I do at Columbia because I guess really like whatever we need you to do, whatever you can do. It's like the work you bring to the table. It's interesting because we work, collectively, independently, collectively, if you will, because we all bring our own style of advocacy and our own area of expertise to the table. And when we bring that to the table, that in its fullness is the mission of the Center for Justice, which is to reduce the nation's reliance on mass incarceration. So it's a great space. So it's a very free space for me to be who I already was, founder of Isaac's Quarterly, the Confined Arts, and bring that in there and have that program be really cultivated there and made sense of in there, because when I got to Columbia, it was just pop-up galleries we were doing. And when I got to Columbia, when I got some counseling from my peers and some mentors, it evolved into what it is today. So, I feel like I went off, but I think
excellent.
but yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to really, it's hard for me to really really pinpoint, but I do so much at Columbia, and everyone there does so much, and we're really just trying to really just make this transition from prison home as easy